Hello everyone! Today we're going to take a look at a couple very old adaptations of Charles Dickens' classic novel A Tale of Two Cities. The first is from 1911, starring Maurice Costello. The second is from 1917, starring William Farnham. I was not planning to do two silent movie videos in a row. Anyone who has watched my channel for any length of time knows I don't like to do two of anything in a row. I like to mix things up, I like to rotate my subjects, much to the algorithm's disgust. But I have had these two silent adaptations on my docket since they were brought up to me last year when I reviewed the 1958 version, and last Saturday I felt encouraged to go ahead and do this now because many of you seemed really happy to hear me talk about a silent movie. And those of you who don't like it, just wait a week, I'll be doing something else. Both films ambitiously tackle Dickens' classic historical novel, in which a group of English and French people get caught in the rising tide of the French Revolution and the subsequent Reign of Terror, with one man finding his purpose in a noble sacrifice. The first thing to point out is that both of these adaptations really are silent films. Unlike last week's subject, Sunrise, which famously broke ground with its synchronized music and sound effects, here, there isn't even any music. At least not for the 1917 one. I did just find an upload of the 1911 one that has music attached. I assume that theatergoers at the time of release would have had a pianist or organist providing live musical accompaniment during screenings. You really need something, because without some sort of music, just watching a mute film feels weird. Apparently, I can't stand to watch a movie in absolute silence because after a couple minutes, I had to put some classical music on in the background. I've put links to both movies in the description so you can check them out if you'd like to, and for the 1911 version, I decided to share a link to the one that has music. It also seems to be better quality, and it's 10 minutes longer. Just ignore that the thumbnail has an image from the 1917 one. The 1911 adaptation of A Tale of Two Cities is actually a short film. As I just mentioned, there are runtime discrepancies on YouTube. I found a couple that are 20 minutes, and I found one that's 30 minutes. I think they're the same film, but the 20-minute one is sped up. And that's what I watched first, unfortunately, which gave me the impression that they were flying through the material. I didn't really like it that much. I came away thinking, well, that wasn't very good, was it? Makes a big difference if you watch the 30-minute one. It's definitely better, it's more watchable, it's easier to follow. I think it is how the movie was intended to be seen. Apparently, this film is something of a cinematic landmark. According to the blurb I read, most theaters didn't want to show films that were more than a single reel because they thought audiences wouldn't like it, wouldn't be able to sit there for that long. Audience retention has always been a problem. But because of the breadth of Dickens' story, more time was needed to do it justice. Thus, this is a 3-reel film. On first release in 1911, each reel was shown on a separate day, but a couple years later, the adaptation was reissued as a single film. The quality of the print is rough, but that's understandable given its age. And as was the case during this early film period, the staging is limited due to the fixed camera position. This makes it harder to judge the quality of the performances, as everyone's kind of restricted to the box, but they're not bad, especially if you're able to forgive the overdramatic gestures and theatrical style. Maurice Costello plays Sidney Carton, and he's pretty good. Messy, woebegone, reaching longingly for Lucy Manette as she walks away. I like that it shows him perking up over time, though. We see him enjoying a friendly visit with the Darnays, holding Lucy's baby in his arms, and I like his expression of relief, almost joy, when he successfully pulls off the substitution. I think this is the only version I have seen where he looks this pleased. There are a couple other interesting casting notes. Producer-director William J. Humphrey also appears in the film as the arrogant Marquis St. Evermond, and future silent starlet Norma Talmadge appears for about 9 seconds as the girl in the tumbril, also known as the seamstress. Despite being extremely abridged, it does manage to get all the major story points in. It's surprisingly faithful without any departures that make me say, hey, what on earth is this? Or why did they do that? I never watch movies that are this old, and it did take some getting used to. There's a certain stiffness to it, which kept it from being a tremendously enjoyable watch for me. And I also found the title cards a bit confusing because instead of just introducing a scene, they would summarize what was about to happen. This is actually fairly helpful, but I'm not used to that. That said, I did like it the second time around when I was able to see the slower, longer version with music, and I would recommend it to Charles Dickens fans, A Tale of Two Cities adaptation completionists, and silent movie buffs. The 1917 adaptation was produced by William Fox, the movie mogul who incidentally also produced 1927's Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans, which I reviewed last week. The very first thing I noticed when I pressed play on this movie was William Fox, and I was like, didn't I just see that name somewhere? This version could really use a restoration. The picture quality is only slightly better, and these handwritten notes are a chore to decipher. Good luck figuring out what this says if you know nothing about the story. This one runs 80 minutes, which is a big improvement, but still much shorter than subsequent adaptations. Considering the length of the book, you would think it must be missing a lot of content, but it's crazy how much they managed to squeeze in. As for omissions, of course there are scenes and characters missing, but things go fast enough that you hardly get a chance to miss them. If you're a Jerry Cruncher superfan, you will be disappointed, but something's gotta go. The bigger difference is that the timeline is condensed for some reason, and some details are rearranged. For example, Dr. Manette, who is released from prison at the beginning of the book, here is freed from his cell when the citizens storm the Bastille about 20 minutes into the film. Usually, the storming of the Bastille happens right smack dab in the middle, I think, or going into the middle. So that was moved up, and then they had these two things happening simultaneously. I'm not sure why. For another example, Charles Darnay and Lucy Manette are not yet married when he is arrested in France. This kind of bugs me, since they are supposed to be married with a child that Madame Defarge views as an enemy because of its Evermond blood. I don't like when they mess with this. I feel like the 1958 version did it too, although not this much. I don't know if they had to change this because they had rushed the timeline and they were like, oh, well, we didn't leave enough time for Lucy to have a baby. I will point out that the 1911 version, despite being significantly shorter, was more faithful on this point, and the previous point as well. Dr. Manette's release, the timing of the murder, and the storming of the Bastille, also the situation with Gabelle, and then Darnay having an Evermond baby that Madame Defarge wants to kill. The 1911 version managed to keep these things straight, while the 1917 version, for some reason, made changes. It's not that big a deal, the story still works. It stood out to me, and I feel nitpicky about it. Fortunately, that's about the extent of the departures from the novel, and really, for an 80-minute adaptation, it stays very close, and it does not rush the poignant moments. I was impressed by the scope and scale of the Bastille attack sequence, with its hundreds of extras, giant fortress sets, and frank depiction of violence and death. It kind of reminded me of the Odessa Steps sequence in 1925's Battleship Potemkin. I was also impressed that, like the 1958 one, this version made time for a full flashback to the incident with the Marquis St. Evremond that landed Dr. Manette in prison. William Farnham stars in dual roles as both Sidney Carton and Charles Darnay, so you'll never catch yourself thinking, they're supposed to be doppelgangers? They look nothing alike. As far as I know, the only other actor to play both parts on film is Chris Sarandon in the 1980 adaptation. Farnham's Darnay is a friendly, smiling, open-faced man with easy manners, while his Carton is unkempt, bloated from dissipation, with heavy shadows under his eyes. This approach to physical differentiation is similar to what was done in the 1980 version, but I found Farnham's performance more expressive than Sarandon's, even without the dialogue. I had been told that he was a very good Sidney Carton, and he is, his sad figure lingering in the background, suffering quietly but deeply. Of course, he is not as good as Ronald Colman. For me, nobody will ever be as good as Ronald Colman in this role, but he holds his own, and I'll even concede that he looks the part more than Colman did. The film plays up the dual role gimmick by including several shots with both characters, and considering it was made 109 years ago, I'm very impressed with the effects. Dr. Manette and his daughter Lucy are pretty good, the Defarges are pretty good. Madame Defarge, despite being such an iconic and forceful character, isn't as present as I expected. With the spy stuff cut down, she doesn't get as many chances to make an impression, though we do get to see how the code in her knitting works. Only in the chaotic French courtroom does she emerge as a central figure when she reads Dr. Manette's testimony denouncing the Evremond family. Miss Pross, though a lesser character, also seems underutilized until late in the game, but at least she gets to shine in her confrontation with Madame Defarge. The scene isn't rushed, and I like her fervent display of loyalty and courage. It's this whole climactic section where I feel the adaptation really comes into its own and shows the strength of the medium, using faces to express thought and emotion. You don't need dialogue to convey Carton's distress at Lucy's helpless situation, or his horror at the cold-blooded revolutionaries, or the tenderness of his goodbye kiss. And while I miss the dialogue in Darnay's prison cell, the fade on Carton's look of relief and resignation is just as powerful without it. Without words, we understand Lucy's emotional upheaval in the carriage, her feelings going from joy to shock to horror to sorrow. And while we don't get to hear Carton's comforting words to the seamstress, I love the simplicity of his taking her bound hand behind their backs. I was surprised by how much I liked both of these films. They're very old, the pace and the acting style take some getting used to, and there are some blink and you'll miss it scenes, especially in the 1917 one, but in spite of that, I found both of them very moving. I think that is a testament to the original novel, which I've always loved. A Tale of Two Cities is a very powerful story, and it seems that as long as you have a decent actor playing Sidney Carton, and you get certain key scenes right, it's hard to mess that up. Nobody take that as a challenge, okay? I don't even want to know what Hollywood could do to A Tale of Two Cities if they made an adaptation today. I am a little bit surprised that it's been this long since we had another one, but I don't want one, okay? I don't want any adaptations of beloved classic novels in this day and age. They can't help messing it up in some way. I know that today is the big day for this awful Wuthering Heights adaptation. Don't even think about asking me if I'm gonna watch it, if I'm gonna review it. Absolutely not, okay? As soon as I saw the first pictures from that production, I was like, this doesn't look right. The fact that it's been marketed as a romance, wrong! That book is not a romantic story. It is not a love story. It's about revenge. It's about awful people being awful to each other and wrecking everyone around them. Ugh! And then the kind of romance that they made it, it's trash. And, like, there's been nothing that I have heard that has convinced me otherwise. This is the era that we are in. Until we are out of it, I don't want any adaptations of anything. Anyway, little tangent there. I wasn't gonna mention Wuthering Heights, but I just couldn't help it. I would love to see a full restoration of the 1917 version, complete with a brand new music score, perhaps, that plays up the intense scenes, but also enhances the heartbreaking moments. The actors are good enough that these scenes work well on their own, so maybe music isn't technically necessary, but something subtle and appropriate might be just the thing. If you've never seen any adaptation of A Tale of Two Cities, don't start here. That doesn't make any sense. I would not recommend that you start with either of these. I would suggest the 1935 version, which is my favorite, or the 1958 version. They're both great films. I don't remember 1980 as much, except that it has a lot of famous actors, and I haven't seen the 1989 one yet, maybe this year, but since they were both made for television, they are longer, more thorough adaptations of the book, and you could start there. However, I am pleased to say that these two silent versions were not bad at all, and if you're up for it, they are worth checking out. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll be back again next Saturday with another review. Definitely not going to be another silent movie. Thanks for watching.